It was the 1800s, and the world was filled with change. The mutiny by the Bengal Army was suppressed, and Britain took over direct government of India from the East India Company. Mahatma Gandhi still lived in South Africa, and Rabindranath Tagore had not yet written Gitanjali. In America, the first telephone message was transmitted, and in Britain, the first electric light was turned on. Charles Darwin published Origin of the Species, and the theory of evolution was born. The Civil War ended in America, and slavery was outlawed. Wilhelm of Prussia was proclaimed Emperor of Germany. In Sindh, India, a son was born to the Kripalani family. He was named Lekraj, and he was an ordinary boy. As the years passed, he grew straight and strong, this son of a schoolmaster. In time, he began a business and married and had children of his own. But still, he was an ordinary man. He was a good man, a kind man, an honorable man, but an ordinary man. And the light touched him and entered his mind. Now his mind was already fine and worked well, but when the light came, he saw that there were shadows in the corners, things left there to think about another tomorrow, things unresolved, matters saved for a day when he had time. But he found he couldn't wait until there was time, for this was not a light he could close his eyes against. This light was inside him and had taken up residence. Eviction was not possible. Not that he really wanted to be without the light, but now and then it would probably have been more comfortable. It did, after all, uncover him to himself. And the light lay in front of his mind like a pathway, or a doorway, or a destination. Sometimes it was barely there, only visible if he concentrated, and he taught himself to keep it where he could see it. Sometimes it filled him until it shone out through his eyes, and others began to sit near him to see what would happen. They knew that something would. And for a while he thought the light was him, was somehow his own essence. But in time he learned that the light was not his, though he had one of his own. This light was other, and it came from some distant place where the rules of physics hung balanced, and time meant something else entirely. And he expected it to be indifferent, but it wasn't. He expected it to be hard with knowledge, but it wasn't. He expected it to be implausible and unreachable and somehow threatening, but it wasn't, and it wasn't, and it wasn't. But it did change him. It laid new understanding gently in his mind, and he saw things he never thought he'd see. He learned about eternity and immortality and consciousness. Things that had seemed important no longer mattered, and he gave away his old life and the things that went with it. Those who waited with him to see what would happen knew this was a chance that fate had given them. He spoke of what the light showed him, and they listened. And some of them changed their days so they could listen. For some, there were obstacles and barriers and difficulties, but they overcame them all, and untangling themselves from the expectations of custom, they came. After all, fate was calling. This was an age when women in that land were made less, and decisions about living were never theirs. And so, from among the ones who came with him, he gave administration into the hands of the women. This was a balance rarely seen in those days and in that place. And so they stayed together, and they were held well and safely for more than a score of years, and they learned how to live. They practiced putting matters of the light first, and matters of the world second. And in time, there was no longer difference to be seen between the two. But winds of change were blowing, and in the way of the world in that time, there was the dissension of boundaries and countries and ownership. Anger and chaos had come to the land, and still they stayed, protected somehow. But when change finally filled the land and closed the door to possibility, they quietly left that place.